Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video we are going to be looking at the 2022 Senate elections and my current prediction as of today, August 16th, for what I think is going to happen in these races. So we're going to hop right into it and begin with our safe Democratic states. So, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Connecticut, New York, and Vermont are all safe Democratic states. For the GOP, I think Idaho, Utah, the Dakotas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, Alabama, and South Carolina. These are states that I believe to be safe. So, some of these states are more debatable than others. I think obviously all of us know Oklahoma is safe for the GOP, but Iowa might be a little less safe because the Democrats are likely going to end up running Abby Finkenauer, who is a former congresswoman from, I believe, the 3rd District, and she won in 2018 in a blue wave year. She won, and then she lost in 2020, which is a more neutral year. So I think that you could consider her to be a wave baby, which is essentially someone that they serve in Congress for one term because they were elected in a really good year for their party. There are a lot of examples of this, Joe Cunningham in South Carolina, Kendra Horn in Oklahoma, and Abby Finkenauer in Iowa is another one. So I do think that Abby Finkenauer is a decent candidate, but she's not likely going to beat Chuck Grassley. Grassley's not even that strong of a candidate. He's, I think, 86 years old, and this is going to probably be his last term in the Senate. But he's just been around for so long and is pretty well liked by Iowans. In 2016, he ran 20 points ahead of Trump, so he definitely helped Trump out in Iowa in 2016, and I think he's going to win big again, especially in a year that's going to be more favorable to the GOP. Now for our likely Democrat states, Colorado I believe to be likely. This is a state that Joe Biden did carry by a safe margin, but I expect to narrow it to narrow up a little bit because Republicans might do a little better in the suburbs of Denver in 2022. It's always a possibility. It could be safe. I could be totally wrong. I could see Michael Bennet winning by 15 points or whatever, but I think likely is the more adequate rating for it because there's always a chance that the Denver suburbs revert to some extent, which could bring down the margin a little bit, but still a race the Democrats are likely going to hold. Now, for our likely Republican states, right now I only see two. That is Alaska, which we can talk about Alaska for a very long time. Really complicated situation there with ranked choice voting and a contested Republican primary. So we have the incumbent Lisa Murkowski running against Kelly Tshibaka. Tshibaka is the more right-wing Republican in this race. She's endorsed by Donald Trump. The Alaska Republican Party endorsed her, and she's definitely going to be winning in that primary, the more MAGA vote. Now, Lisa Murkowski is probably going to rely on crossover support from Democrats, as well as moderate or establishment Republicans. She's been endorsed by most Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell endorsed her. I think the Republican Party actually has endorsed her. So she's more well liked by the party establishment, but she's certainly more moderate, and she's less of a party line vote than Kelly Tshibaka would be. But yeah, now the winner of that primary is likely going to go on to face Al Gross, the Democrat who ran in 2020, could run again, and we could see a three-way race where ranked choice voting comes in. But as of right now, I think it's likely Republican, but this is a really complicated race. The only other likely Republican state that I see here is the state of Florida, which Florida, I've been pretty cautious about Rubio. People think he's going to win by upwards of 10. I don't think that's going to happen. I think people were acting like Florida is this super Republican state, which it's a Republican-leaning state for sure, but it's still a state that Barack Obama won in 2012. The Democrats in 2018, they came within a point of winning a governor race and a Senate race, and they actually did win a statewide race in Florida in 2018. They won the agriculture commissioner's race, which, again, very insignificant, but Democrats can win Florida. They win competitive House seats every year, and, they came within 3 points of beating Donald Trump in 2020, and there are many seats in the House that the Democrats won by 3 points that the Republicans could be favored to flip next year. So, I don't want to hear this whole argument that, 3 points in Florida means a lot, because it's important and the Republicans should be happy with where they are in the state, but Florida is still a very competitive state, and I wrote an article about it on Substack, by the way. The Democrats can still win Florida without even improving in Miami-Dade. So still a path for Democrats. It's a tall order for sure. It relies on them getting the right turnout from the right people and the right swings in the right places, but it's still possible. So I don't think Rubio is going to win by 10. I think he's going to win by 5. He could win by even less, because realistically, what's he going to do better than Trump? he could possibly do better than Trump and, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. But Trump did pretty well there. I mean, he came within 7 points of winning Miami-Dade. So I think Rubio's going to run even with Trump in Miami-Dade, maybe do a little better. And I think he's going to do potentially even worse than Trump or in the suburbs, because he would be running against Val Deming. So I think he's a pretty good candidate for the suburbs. Pinellas County areas like Pinellas or Seminole or Duval, I think she could do pretty well there. She might not win all of them, which I'm not saying she's some suburban juggernaut, but I'm talking about possibilities here, and it's possible that suburban swings in Florida continue, and Marco Rubio's not immune to that. There's also the possibility that he just does really well in the suburbs, so just laying that out. But I do think he's going to do worse than Trump with rural voters, especially in the Panhandle. He might do a little better with seniors, but with rural voters in general, I think he's just still going to do worse because he doesn't get the right turnout from them. So Rubio, I still think Florida's likely Republican. I still think Rubio's going to win by upwards of 5, but not not a 10-point margin. Now, for our lean D states, I am going to put Nevada in the lean Democratic column. So Nevada, I've talked a lot about Nevada in the past. I think that this is a pretty overrated pickup opportunity, and it's Nevada's become so underrated that it's become overrated. It's kind of like the Alaska Senate of 2022, because people were like, don't sleep on Nevada flipping, and then I don't think it's going to be as close as people think. It could be within 3%. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but I just think that as of right now, Catherine Cortez Masto is in a pretty good spot. I mean, when we talk about her potential or her ability to win elections, she won in 2016, which was a pretty bad year for Democrats. She's maintained pretty good approval ratings throughout her tenure in the Senate, and she's also running as a kind of a Democrat who's going to appeal to both progressives and moderates, and that's going to help her. I think she can do very well with voters that voted for Trump in Clark County, like Hispanics who shifted to the right in 2020, or working class voters. She can do better there. She can also continue the improvement in Washoe County. She actually lost Washoe in 2016 despite winning the state, which is pretty odd, but I think she's going to flip it this time. And she can also improve in the rural areas of Nevada, because realistically, without Trump on the ballot, I don't see them getting. I don't see the GOP getting really a great turnout from the cow counties, which really elevated Trump in 2020, because he got such good numbers from the cow county, from the cow counties. But end of the day, I think this is a titanium lean Democrat state, the same way that Florida is a titanium lean Republican state. Now in Arizona. Arizona's close to being tilt. I'll have it as lean because look, Arizona is pretty swingy with the national environment. They consistently tend to vote 4 to 5% to the right of the country. They voted about 4% to the right of the country in 2020 and 2018 in their House elections. I think they voted 5% to the right of the country. In 2016, they voted 5% to the right of the country. So they're kind of right there. Arizona's shifting to the left for sure. So we could see a scenario where Arizona does vote kind of, I guess you could say, less than 5 points to the right of the country, because realistically we're expecting the national environment to be like D+1 or D+2. So Arizona for sure could easily, we could easily see something where the Republicans win the House vote, which they did in 2020, or they win the governor's race, which I expect them to, but Mark Kelly survives because of his popularity, because he did run 2 points ahead of Joe Biden in the state, and, he's shown that he has the ability to win in Arizona despite the fact that it's, overall been a more Republican state, because people forget Arizona did still vote for congressional Republicans overall in 2020 despite Biden and Kelly winning their races. So, that's all to say that Kelly could be in danger of losing, depending on how well Kimberly Yee does, if she gets the nomination for governor, or how well the House GOP does. But I still don't think that, this is what I'll say about races like Nevada and Arizona. They could be competitive, and there are scenarios where I could see them flipping. But as of right now, you can't realistically tell me that the GOP would be favored this early on when you have incumbents like Kelly and Cortez Masto being quite popular. So, yeah, that's it for our lean D state. Oh, I forgot one. Georgia, lean Democrat, I think. The Republicans, their best bet right now is probably Gary Black, but he has some issues. First of all, he is not very charismatic. He also is a candidate that might not get the best appeal from Trump voters. He did well in 2018 because Trump voters kind of voted for him because they came out because Trump did rally in Georgia in 2018, and he really wanted Brian Kemp to win that gubernatorial election. He now obviously just don't like Kemp anymore, but in 2018, Donald Trump was still the president, and the Republicans who are more tied to Trump than the party itself were more inclined to come out to vote. I don't think that's going to happen to the same extent in 2022. There are going to be some, I guess Trump Republicans that are still going to be coming out to vote because of Trump, but you can't tell me that realistically speaking we can expect the same amount as 2016, 2018, or 2020. So, Georgia, I think the GOP has a major problem there with the suburbs swinging against them, and they don't really have any more area to gain in the rurals. So their best performances, Georgia, were like 2010, 2012, 2014, and since then it's been shifting to the left. Now, for our lean GOP states, I believe I see 3. So Ohio, I think, is a lean Republican state, and I'm moving from likely to lean, and just because that primary in Ohio is really, really messy between J.D. Vance, Josh Mandel, and James Timken. So Timken is definitely the most moderate of the 3, although she's still pretty right-wing. She's favored by the establishment GOP, and I think that moderates, suburban Republicans are going to vote for her. Josh Mandel kind of has some amount of crossover appeal, and that some suburban voters are going to vote for him, and some right-wing populist voters are going to vote for him. And J.D. Vance is just relying entirely on a coalition of right-wing populists to come out and vote. I think J.D. Vance is, personally, I think J.D. Vance is overrated in the sense of his electability in the primary. He'd do pretty well in the general election, but his support seems to be pretty online. Like, it kind of reminds me of Nina Turner, where Turner had a lot of support online, and she had a lot of energy online, and then she lost on election day because most voters just were just turned off by her rhetoric. Because that, and we can talk about that later, but she was a progressive running in a pretty moderate district, and at the end of the day, that's not going to help you no matter how good of a campaign you run. So for Ohio, I think J.D. Vance, he can do very well with working class voters if he, assuming he runs the right campaign. But at the end of the day, I don't see a path to victory for him here. I think that Mandel's probably going to win the primary with Timken coming in a close second. And if Mandel gets the nomination, I think this is a lean Republican race. Josh Mandel is a pretty bad candidate statewide, in my opinion. So I don't know if it's actually him running his Twitter account, but he said to delete multiple tweets for saying it's I guess I'll say it. His tweets can be interpreted as Islamophobic, as misogynistic, as racist, as homophobic, or as xenophobic. He's been accused of being a bigot in the past. I'm not going to say whether or not I agree with the allegations, but it's certainly going to come up. Now, Ohio is a state that has voted to the right of the country in the past in 2020 and did vote, I think, 12 points to the right of the country, so I'm not saying the Democrats are going to win, but I think Josh Mandel would do really, really poorly in the suburbs. He'd probably lose Lorain County. He'd probably come within 5 points of losing Lake County, which was, I think, a 16-point Trump county in 2020, and I think he'd lose Delaware County as well, which is a county that's shifting to the left. He'd also probably not do as well as Trump in working-class areas, although I don't think any Republican could do that, and he'd lose support in rural areas because, A, Tim Ryan is a much better rural area candidate than Joe Biden was. He's from a working-class district. I think he has more appeal to these voters. And B, without Trump on the ballot, I don't think rural voters are going to come out in as big numbers as they did in 2020. So Ohio, moving it from likely Republican to lean Republican, but still a race the Republicans should win. North Carolina's another one. So North Carolina, I'm pretty torn about whether it should be lean or tilt. I think the GOP is favored, but I'll have it as lean right now, because I think Ted Budd's a pretty strong candidate for them. Ted Budd has appeal to both the suburbs of North Carolina and the MAGA voters, I guess you could say, because he was endorsed by Donald Trump. The only way I could see the Democrats really being favored in this race is if Pat McCrory got the nomination. Pat McCrory is the former governor. He's running for Senate, and he actually lost the governor's race in 2016 despite Trump winning the state on the same ballot. So there are some Trump voters who don't like McCrory. So I think if he got the nomination, we could be talking about a more competitive race here. But Ted Budd, I think, is a good candidate for the GOP, and Sherry Beasley, as strong of a candidate as she may be for the Democrats, don't think she can pull it off in a more Republican year. Now, these are the three closest races. New Hampshire is really close to being tilt, but I'll have it as lean because I still think Sununu is going to run. I originally expected him to announce on June or July, because that's when the New Hampshire legislative session ended. That's when he originally said he was going to announce, but I think it's really, really torn whether he's going to run or not, because I think he wants to stay as governor, because I think he enjoys the job more. His family are kind of governors. John Sununu is the former governor. But at the same time, I think his aides in the Republican Party are really urging him to run because, look, if Sununu doesn't run, like let's say New Hampshire goes blue, the Democrats don't even have to flip a single seat, and they will still have the majority. They don't have to win Pennsylvania. They don't have to win Wisconsin. They don't have to win North Carolina anymore, because if Sununu doesn't run, that really crosses off a path to the GOP, and they would need to flip one of these Sunbelt states. I don't think that they're really, because Nevada and Arizona, the Republicans are really having good candidates to run there. Kimberly Yu is their only good candidate to field, and she's running for governor. In Georgia, Herschel Walker looked like a good candidate until we saw his scandals. So New Hampshire is really the only race that they have where they can really actually field a strong candidate. And if Sununu doesn't run, that's really, really bad news for the GOP. So that being said, I still think he's going to run. But this is a race that I think both parties are sweating bullets. Because if Sununu runs, that's a very bad day for Democratic chances in the state. If Sununu does not run, the Republicans just lost a huge part of their path to victory. And I think their chance of winning the Senate go from like 50% to like 25 to 30%. So that is something that they really need to. They should be going all in to recruit Sununu, because if they do, they can afford to, not one of these southern seats that they in the past were more competitive in. So New Hampshire for now I think is lean Republican, Sununu being the favorite over Maggie Hassan, but if he does not run, I'm moving it to likely Democrat. Now, these two Rust Belt states I think are going to determine the outcome of the Senate. We've got Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. So to make this interesting, I will not give out the majority yet. I'll give Wisconsin to the GOP. So I originally had Wisconsin as Tilt D with Ron Johnson, but, it really comes down to where we are from COVID in 6 months from now, because if we're still wearing masks, if we're still getting tested for, school or whatnot every day, or every week, I guess, that's not good for Democrats. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy, and right now we're not really getting that. Now, on the flip side, if Democrats can improve their situation with COVID, which I read a study the other day saying that the Delta surge should be over by mid-September. Fingers crossed it will, because I'm not in the mood for another year of lockdowns. But if coronavirus starts to get under control again, as it was maybe in April or May, then Democrats are looking at better prospects in 2022. So I think Wisconsin's really going to go pretty much even with the national environment, or maybe I'd say actually 2 points to the right of the national environment, because it did vote 3 points to the right of it in 2020. So I think to win Wisconsin, the Democrats have to win the generic ballot by at least 2.5, ideally 3 or 4, which Joe Biden won the popular vote by 4.4% in 2020. House Democrats won it by 3. House Democrats narrowly lost the Wisconsin popular vote. So Wisconsin voted about 3.5% to the right of the country in the House. So I guess that's a better example because of congressional elections. So the Democrats would ideally be winning the popular vote by at least 3 to win Wisconsin's Senate race, but that could really change. Mandela Barnes is probably going to be the Democratic candidate. He's the lieutenant governor. He hasn't won statewide on his own before, but he seems like a strong candidate because he does have appeal to working class voters, and because he could do really well turnout from Milwaukee. Ron Johnson is a pretty weak incumbent, but he did win 2016 when most people expected him to lose. So I say the Democrats have had a history of underachieving in Wisconsin in key races in 2016. In 2018, they had a golden opportunity to flip a House seat. They could not do that. And Wisconsin's a state that's trending away from them. So I think, as of right now, I'd say the Republicans are favored to win it, but that could change. Ron Johnson could lose. It's very close. That's why it's tilt not safe, as I always say. But Wisconsin right now, I think the GOP is favored. Now, Pennsylvania is the last state, and I'm going to leave it as a pure toss-up. I know you guys hate when I do this. I know no one likes, you guys want to see who I give the majority to. If I had to right now, if you drive my feet to the fire, I'd probably give it to the GOP. But it's really, really close, and I'm writing an article on Substack about it, which I highly encourage you to check out. But basically, it depends on the candidate. So if John Fetterman or Malcolm Kenyatta is the candidate for the Democrats, I think it's still Republican. If Conor Lamb is the candidate for the Democrats, I think it's still Democrat. So, Lamb, I think, is the best candidate for Democrats. He comes from a working class / suburban district outside of Pittsburgh, and he won in 2017 a special election to Trump plus 20 district, which is incredible. He outperformed Hillary Clinton by 21% to win that seat. And it was then redistricted because the Supreme Court ruled that the map was unconstitutional. So they redrew the map. They gave Conor Lamb a seat that Joe Biden won by 3 in 2020. He won by 3 in 2020. He won by, I think, 11 in 2018. So he did regress in 2020, but he still did very well in the ancestral Democrat area of the district, Beaver County, which is kind of a working class Democratic county that last voted for Democrats in like 1996 with Bill Clinton. So he can do very well with those voters. He did okay in the suburbs. He ran behind Biden by like half a point in the suburbs of Allegheny County, but still pretty impressive considering how well Joe Biden did in the suburbs of Pennsylvania. So, that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed, please do leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out my Twitter, Instagram, Substack, all social media that I really post a lot on. Twitter, I'd say, I'm most active on Twitter. Try to get me to 1,000 by the end of the summer. I think I'm at like 830, 840, 850 right now on Twitter. Let's get 2,000 by the end of the summer. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.